In this world of shadows and reflections, man has been taught to look outside himself for power, for guidance, for fulfillment. He has been told to work harder, to strive continuously, to struggle against circumstances. He has been conditioned to believe that his reality is fixed and that his power is limited. But I tell you tonight with absolute certainty that this is not so. The one and only thing you need to do is to assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled. Assume it completely. Embody it wholly. And then rest in the absolute conviction that what you have assumed must and will objectify itself in your world. This is the law, and it cannot fail. Let me explain this law more fully. The Bible, which is the greatest psychological book ever written, tells us, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. This is not a poetic suggestion, but a statement of immutable law. Your consciousness, your inner conversations, your feeling states are the pulse of the phenomena of your life. When you assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled, when you live from the end as though it were already accomplished, you set in motion a series of events that must lead to the externalization of your assumption. This is not magic or superstition. It is the operation of an impersonal, impartial law that shapes your world according to the content of your consciousness. The world that you see around you is nothing more than your own consciousness objectified. Your external reality is a mirror reflecting back to you your internal assumptions. If you do not like what you see in your world, you need not wage war against effects. You need only change the cause, which is your own wonderful human imagination. I do not suggest that you ignore the evidence of your senses. I am not asking you to deny the facts of your present experience. Rather, I am inviting you to understand that these facts are only temporary effects of past assumptions, and they hold no power over you, except the power that you give them through your continued attention and belief. Your imagination is the power that shapes your world, and this power is God Himself operating in you. The Bible tells us that man is made in the image of God. This does not refer to a physical likeness, for God is not a physical being. It refers to your creative power, your ability to create reality through your imagination. Tonight I ask you to test this law. Select a desire, something that you truly want to be, to do, or to have. It matters not what it is, for the principle works with mathematical precision, regardless of the nature or magnitude of your desire. It could be a new home, a specific sum of money, the restoration of a relationship, the attainment of a position, or perfect health. The only requirement is that your desire feels natural to you, that it is something you would experience if it were true. Once you have selected your desire, ask yourself, how would I feel if my desire were already fulfilled? Then capture that feeling, saturate yourself with it, make it so vivid, so real, that for a moment you forget that it is not yet an objective fact. This is the art of assumption, and it is the first and only step that you need to take. When you assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled, you are actually experiencing your desire in the only place it can ever be experienced, in your consciousness. And since consciousness is the one and only reality, what you experience in consciousness is just as real, just as substantial, just as actual as anything you have ever experienced through your senses. Now, having assumed the feeling of your wish fulfilled, you must rest in the absolute assurance that what you have assumed must objectify itself. This rest is not a passive waiting, but an active Sabbath, a complete cessation of any mental or physical effort to make your desire come to pass. The moment you begin to wonder when or how your desire will be realized, you have broken your Sabbath. You have interrupted the natural flow of manifestation. The law does not require your help. It requires only your compliance, your willingness to mentally live in the end, to dwell in the state of already being what you want to be. Many times in my own life, I have applied this principle, and it has never failed me. I recall a time when I desired to travel to New York, but I had no money for the journey. Instead of worrying about how I would acquire the funds, I simply assumed that I was already in New York. I walked the streets of New York in my imagination. I saw the buildings, felt the hustle and bustle of the city, heard the sounds of traffic. and experience the unique energy that is New York. I did this not once, but repeatedly, until it felt completely natural to me. Then I rested. I did not concern myself with the how, with the means, with the manner of fulfillment. I simply lived from the assumption that I was already in New York. And within a matter of days, I received a letter containing an invitation to speak in New York, with all expenses paid and a generous honorarium included. This is the law in operation. This is the principle of only do this, then rest. It is not necessary to know how your desire will be fulfilled. It is not necessary to manipulate people or circumstances. It is only necessary to assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled and then to rest in the conviction that what you have assumed must objectify itself. This law is universal and impersonal. It works for everyone regardless of age, background, education, or religious belief. It works for the atheist as effectively as it works for the devout believer. For it is not a matter of faith in an external power, but of the natural operation of your own wonderful human imagination. Let me now address some of the questions and concerns that may arise as you contemplate this principle. You may wonder, but what about action? Surely I must do something to realize my desire. And I say to you, yes, you will act, but your actions will flow naturally and effortlessly from your assumption. When you truly assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled, you will be compelled to act in ways that facilitate the realization of your desire. The actions, however, are not the cause of your realization. They are the effects of your assumption. They are part of the bridge of incidents that leads inevitably to the fulfillment of your desire. So do not concern yourself with planning a course of action. Simply assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled, and then do whatever you are impelled to do with ease and with joy. You may also wonder about the time frame. How long will it take for your desire to manifest? The answer is that it will take as long as it takes you to naturalize the state of consciousness that corresponds to your desire. For some, this may happen in an instant. For others, it may require repeated assumptions over a period of time. The time element is not determined by the magnitude of your desire, but by the intensity and consistency of your assumption. If you find yourself slipping back into the old state of consciousness, the state of lack or limitation, do not condemn yourself. Simply acknowledge the slip and gently return to the feeling of your wish fulfilled. Remember, you are re-educating your subconscious mind, training it to accept a new concept of yourself. And this may require persistence and patience. Another concern that may arise is, what about my present circumstances? They seem to contradict my desire. And to this I say, your present circumstances are the harvest of seeds you have sown in the past, the materialization of past assumptions. They have no power to prevent the realization of your current assumptions. In fact, circumstances in themselves have no power whatsoever. They are only facts, and facts are the fruit of past assumptions. When you change your assumptions, when you assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled, you plant new seeds, which must in time produce a new harvest. So do not be dismayed by the apparent contradiction between your desire and your present experience. Instead, be faithful to your assumption. Live from the end well in the state of already being what you want to be. And in due course, your world will rearrange itself to reflect your new state of consciousness. The principle of only do this, then rest is actually a technique of prayer. But it is not the kind of prayer that begs or beseeches an external power for favors. It is not the kind of prayer that asks God to change his mind or to make an exception to his laws. It is rather the prayer of thanksgiving, the prayer of gratitude for what is already yours in consciousness. When you assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled, you are acknowledging that what you desire is already yours, that it is a present fact in consciousness, and that it must, by law, externalize itself in your world. This acknowledgement, this feeling of gratitude for what is already yours, is the highest form of prayer. In the Bible, we are told, whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours. This is not a promise for the future, but a statement of an existing fact. When you pray believing that you have already received what you desire, you are applying the principle of only do this, then rest. You are acknowledging the present reality of your desire in consciousness, and you are allowing the law to work without your interference. Let me share another experience from my own life to illustrate this principle. There was a time when I desired a specific sum of money. Instead of worrying about how I would acquire this money, I simply assumed that I already had it. I felt the feeling of financial security, the feeling of having more than enough. I heard the words, "Isn't it wonderful?" echoing in my mind. I persisted in this assumption until it felt completely natural to me. Then I rested. I did not concern myself with the how or the when. I simply lived from the assumption that the money was already mine. And within a short period, through a series of unexpected events, the exact sum of money came into my possession. This is the law in operation. This is the power of your wonderful human imagination. This is the meaning of only do this, then rest. It is not necessary to know how your desire will be fulfilled. It is not necessary to make things happen. It is only necessary to assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled, and then to rest in the conviction that what you have assumed must externalize itself. Now, let me address another aspect of this principle, an aspect that many find challenging. Sometimes, after assuming the feeling of your wish fulfilled, you may experience a period of seeming inactivity or even apparent setbacks. This is what I call the interval of transition, the time between your assumption and its manifestation in the external world. During this interval, it may seem as though nothing is happening, or worse, that things are moving in the opposite direction from your desire. But I assure you, beneath the surface of appearances, the law is working with perfect precision. The seed you have planted in consciousness is germinating, and in due course it will produce the fruit of your desire. This interval of transition is a testing time, a time when your faith in the law is put to the test. It is also a time of adjustment, a time when the elements of your world are being rearranged to bring about the fulfillment of your desire. So do not be discouraged by appearances during this interval. Instead, hold fast to your assumption, knowing that the law cannot fail. Remember, your imagination creates reality. What you assume, you become. Therefore, be careful what you assume, for you are constantly assuming, whether you know it or not. Every thought, every inner conversation, every feeling state is an assumption that will objectify itself. So choose your assumptions wisely, for they are the seeds of your future experiences. The principle of only do this, then rest is not just a technique for achieving specific desires. It is a way of life, a continuous dwelling in the state of the wish fulfilled. It is the recognition that your consciousness, your I am, is the only reality, and that the world around you is simply the mirror reflecting back to you the contents of your own consciousness. When you live from this understanding, when you continuously assume the feeling of your wish is fulfilled, you live in a state of perpetual fulfillment. You no longer experience lack or limitation, for you know that whatever you desire is already yours in consciousness, and by law, it must externalize itself in your world. This is the secret of harmony, the secret of abundance, the secret of perfect self-expression. It is not something that you need to acquire or achieve. It is something that you already possess, for it is the very nature of your being. Your wonderful human imagination is God Himself creating reality. So use it lovingly, use it wisely, and use it continually to create the life that you desire. Now let me address a question that often arises: what about other people? Can I use this principle to change the behavior of others? And to this I say, yes, you can, but not by trying to change them directly. You can only change others by changing yourself, by changing your concept of them. Others can only play the parts that you assign to them in your imagination. They can only reflect back to you your own assumptions about them. So if you find yourself in conflict with another person, do not try to change their behavior. Change your assumption about them. See them as you would like them to be, not as they appear to be at the moment. When you assume that another person is as you would like them to be, when you hear them saying what you would like to hear, when you see them doing what you would like them to do, you are planting seeds in consciousness that must bear fruit. They will change, not because you have manipulated them, but because you have changed your concept of them. This is not control or manipulation. It is simply the recognition that your consciousness is the only reality, and that others can only reflect back to you the contents of your own consciousness. So treat others with love and respect, always seeing the best in them, always assuming the best about them, and they will inevitably reflect back to you the very qualities that you have assumed for them. Let me share yet another experience to illustrate this principle. There was a time when I had a colleague who was extremely difficult to work with. Instead of focusing on his shortcomings and perpetuating the conflict, I chose to see him differently in my imagination. I imagined him being cooperative, supportive, and pleasant to work with. I persisted in this assumption until it felt natural to me. Then I rested. I did not try to change his behavior through external means. I simply lived from the assumption that he was already as I desired him to be. And within a matter of weeks, his behavior towards me changed completely. He became cooperative, supportive, and pleasant just as I had assumed. This is the law in operation. This is the power of your wonderful human imagination. This is the meaning of only do this, then rest. It is not necessary to manipulate others or to force changes in their behavior. It is only necessary to assume that they are as you would like them to be, and then to rest in the conviction that what you have assumed must externalize itself. Now, let me address another aspect of this principle, an aspect that many find challenging, the concept of revision. Revision is the art of revisioning, of reimagining past events in a way that is more aligned with your desires. It is not a denial of facts, but a recognition that facts are fluid, that they are subject to change through the power of your imagination. If you find yourself dwelling on a painful memory, a past failure, or a regrettable incident, you have the power to revise it. You can reimagine it in a way that is more beneficial to you and to others. You can see it differently, experience it differently in your imagination. And by doing so, you can change its impact on your present and future. This is not mere wishful thinking or self-deception. It is the recognition that memory is not fixed, that it is constantly being reinterpreted and reconstructed by your consciousness. So you have the power to reconstruct your memories in a way that serves your highest good. When you revise an event, you are not changing the physical facts of what occurred. You are changing your experience of it, your interpretation of it. And this change in consciousness will inevitably be reflected in your work. The event may not be erased from the record of physical facts, but its power over you will be neutralized, and its consequences may be mitigated or even transformed. So if there is something in your past that troubles you, something that you regret, or that causes you pain, revise it. See it differently in your imagination. Experience it differently. Feel differently about it. And then rest in the conviction that your revision has changed not only your present and future, but also the influence of the past upon your present and future. The principle of only do this, then rest applies to all aspects of your life, to all of your desires, to all of your challenges. It is the one and only principle that you need to know and to apply to transform your life completely. It is the essence of all spiritual teachings, the heart of all true prayer, the substance of all effective action. So tonight I invite you to test this principle. Select a desire, something that you truly want to be, to do, or to have. Assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled. Experience it vividly in your imagination. Make it so real, so natural, that for a moment you forget that it is not yet an objective fact. Then rest in the absolute assurance that what you have assumed must externalize itself. Do not concern yourself with the how or the when. Do not worry about the means or the manner of fulfillment. Simply live from the end. Dwell in the state of already being what you want to be. And in due course, your world will rearrange itself to reflect your new state of consciousness. This is the law, and it cannot fail. This is the principle of only do this, then rest. It is the secret of all successful living, the key to all fulfillment, the path to all true happiness. It is not something that you need to strive for or to earn. It is your birthright, the very nature of your being. Your wonderful human imagination is God Himself creating reality. So use it lovingly, use it wisely, and use it continually to create the life that you desire. Let me share with you one more experience to illustrate the power of this principle. There was a time when I desired to own a specific property. It was a beautiful home in a desirable location, but it was far beyond my financial means at the time. Instead of focusing on the obstacles, on the lack of money, on the seeming impossibility of acquiring the property, I simply assumed that it was already mine. I walked through the home in my imagination. I felt the feeling of ownership. I experienced the joy of living there. I did this not once, but repeatedly, until it felt completely natural to me. Then I rested. I did not concern myself with the how or the when. I simply lived from the assumption that the home was already mine. And within a matter of months, through a series of unexpected events, the property became available to me at a price that I could afford, and I became the owner of that beautiful home. This is the law in operation. This is the power of your wonderful human imagination. This is the meaning of only do this, then rest. I want to emphasize again that this principle is not just about acquiring material possessions or achieving specific goals. It is about living from a state of perpetual fulfillment, about recognizing that your consciousness is the only reality, and that your world is simply the mirror reflecting back to you the contents of your own consciousness. When you live from this understanding, when you continuously assume the feeling of your wishes fulfilled, you live in a state of joy and abundance. You no longer experience lack or limitation, for you know that whatever you desire is already yours in consciousness, and by law, it must externalize itself in your world. This is the secret of harmony, the secret of abundance, the secret of perfect self-expression. It is not something that you need to acquire or achieve. It is something that you already possess, for it is the very nature of your being. Your wonderful human imagination is God Himself creating reality. So use it lovingly, use it wisely, and use it continually to create the life that you desire. Now, let me address a concept that is closely related to the principle of only do this, then rest, the concept of states of consciousness or states of being. A state is a mood, a feeling, a conviction, a belief about yourself and your world. It is a way of experiencing yourself and your reality. At every moment you are in a state of consciousness, and this state determines what you experience in your external world. Your state is the cause, your experience is the effect. Change your state, and you change your experience. It is as simple as that. But how do you change your state? You change it through the power of assumption. You assume a new state by imagining what it would be like to be in that state, by feeling the feelings associated with that state, by thinking the thoughts that you would think if you were in that state. When you assume a new state, when you occupy it fully in your imagination, you are actually experiencing that state in the one place it can ever be experienced, in your consciousness. And since consciousness is the one and only reality, what you experience in consciousness is just as real, just as substantial, just as actual as anything you have ever experienced through your senses. So if you want to change your life, change your state. If you want to experience more abundance, assume the state of abundance. If you want to experience more love, assume the state of being loved. If you want to experience better health, assume the state of perfect health. Do not worry about how you will move from your current state to your desired state. Do not concern yourself with the bridge of incidents that will lead you there. Simply assume the new state. Occupy it fully in your imagination. And then rest in the absolute assurance that your assumption must externalize itself. This is the law, and it cannot fail. This is the principle of only do this, then rest. It is the secret of all successful living, the key to all fulfillment, the path to all true happiness. It is not something that you need to strive for or to earn. It is your birthright, the very nature of your being. Your wonderful human imagination is God Himself creating reality. So use it lovingly, use it wisely, and use it continually to create the life that you desire. Assume the state that corresponds to your desire. Live from that state, and your world will inevitably reflect back to you the content of your assumption. I want to emphasize again that this principle is not just a technique for achieving specific desires. It is a way of life, a continuous dwelling in the state of the wish fulfilled. It is the recognition that your consciousness, your I am, is the only reality, and that the world around you is simply the mirror reflecting back to you the contents of your own consciousness. When you live from this understanding, when you continuously assume the feeling of your wishes fulfilled, you live in a state of perpetual fulfillment. You no longer experience lack or limitation, for you know that whatever you desire is already yours in consciousness, and by law it must externalize itself in your world. This is the secret of harmony, the secret of abundance, the secret of perfect self-expression. It is not something that you need to acquire or achieve. It is something that you already possess, for it is the very nature of your being. Your wonderful human imagination is God Himself creating reality. So use it lovingly, use it wisely, and use it continually to create the life that you desire. Now let me address another question that often arises. What if my desire seems impossible? What if it contradicts the facts of my present experience? And to this I say all things are possible to God, and God is your own wonderful human imagination. Nothing is impossible to the creative power that resides within you. The facts of your present experience are only temporary effects of past assumptions. They have no power to prevent the realization of your current assumptions. In fact, what seems impossible to your rational mind is often the easiest thing in the world to achieve through the power of your imagination. The Bible tells us with God all things are possible, and all things are possible to him who believes. These are not empty promises, but statements of immutable law. When you believe, when you assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled, you set in motion a series of events that must lead to the externalization of your assumption. So do not be dismayed by the apparent impossibility of your desire. Do not be discouraged by the facts of your present experience. Instead, assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled. Live from that assumption and wait confidently for its manifestation in your world. Remember, the universe is infinite in its possibilities, and your consciousness is the one and only reality. What you assume, you become. Therefore, assume the best, assume the highest, assume the most beautiful, and your world will inevitably reflect back to you the content of your assumption. Now, let me address one more aspect of this principle, an aspect that many find challenging, the concept of detachment. Detachment is not indifference or lack of desire. It is freedom from anxiety, freedom from worry, freedom from the compulsion to make things happen through your own effort. When you truly assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled, when you live from the end, as though it were already accomplished, you experience a natural detachment. You no longer feel the need to strive or to struggle, for you know that what you desire is already yours in consciousness, and by law it must externalize itself in your world. This detachment is the rest that follows the doing. It is the Sabbath that comes after the work of assumption. It is the peace that surpasses all understanding, the quiet confidence that comes from knowing that the law cannot fail. So after you have assumed the feeling of your wish fulfilled, detach yourself from any concern about how or when your desire will manifest. Trust the law, trust your assumption, trust the process of manifestation. Live each day in the joyful expectation of experiencing your desire, but without anxiety, without tension, without forcing. This is the true meaning of letting go and letting God. It is not surrendering your desire or giving up on your dream. It is surrendering your attachment to the how and the when, and allowing the law to work in its own perfect way and time. The principle of only do this, then rest is simple, yet it requires a radical shift in consciousness. It requires you to turn away from appearances, from the evidence of your senses, and to place your trust in the unseen reality of your imagination. It requires you to recognize that your consciousness is the only reality, and that your world is simply the mirror reflecting back to you the contents of your own consciousness. When you make this shift, when you begin to live from this understanding, your life will be transformed in ways that you cannot now imagine. You will experience a freedom a joy, an abundance that is beyond your current conception. This is the promise of the principle of only do this, then rest. It is the promise of life more abundant, of peace that surpasses all understanding, of power that knows no limits. It is the promise of your own wonderful human imagination, which is God Himself creating reality. So tonight I invite you once more to test this principle. Select a desire, something that you truly want to be, to do, or to have. Assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled. Experience it vividly in your imagination. Make it so real, so natural, that for a moment you forget that it is not yet an objective fact. Then rest in the absolute assurance that what you have assumed must externalize itself. Do not concern yourself with the how or the when. Do not worry about the means or the manner of fulfillment. Simply live from the end. Dwell in the state of already being what you want to be. And in due course your world will rearrange itself to reflect your new state of consciousness. This is the law, and it cannot fail. This is the principle of only do this, then rest. It is the secret of all successful living, the key to all fulfillment, the path to all true happiness. It is not something that you need to strive for or to earn. It is your birthright, the very nature of your being. Your wonderful human imagination is God Himself creating reality. So use it lovingly, use it wisely, and use it continually to create the life that you desire. Assume the state that corresponds to a desire, live from that state, and your world will inevitably reflect back to you the content of your assumption. In conclusion, I want to emphasize once more that the principle of only do this, then rest is not just a technique for achieving specific desires. It is a way of life, a continuous dwelling in the state of the wish fulfilled. It is the recognition that your consciousness, your I am, is the only reality, and that the world around you is simply the mirror reflecting back to you the contents of your own consciousness. When you live from this understanding, when you continuously assume the feeling of your wishes fulfilled, you live in a state of perpetual fulfillment. You no longer experience lack or limitation, for you know that whatever you desire is already yours in consciousness. And by law, it must externalize itself in your world. This is the secret of harmony, the secret of abundance, the secret of perfect self-expression. It is not something that you need to acquire or achieve. It is something that you already possess, for it is the very nature of your being. Your wonderful human imagination is God Himself creating reality. So use it lovingly, use it wisely, and use it continually to create the life that you desire. Remember, the one and only thing you need to do is to assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled. Assume it completely, embody it wholly, and then rest in the absolute conviction that what you have assumed will objectify itself in your world. This is the law, and it cannot fail. This is the meaning of only do this, then rest. Nothing else is needed. God bless you all.
In the silence of your heart, there is a truth that resonates louder than any voice. God's plan for you is unshakable. Life may throw its fiercest storms, people may try to dim your light, and circumstances may attempt to block your path, but nothing can halt the divine orchestration of God's will in your life. His plan is not dependent on human approval, nor is it swayed by the opinion of fear or actions of others. It is rooted in His infinite wisdom and boundless love. When challenges arise, it is easy to feel forgotten or lost. You may wonder if the setbacks you face are signs of failure or abandonment. But remember, the obstacles in your way are not detours away from God's purpose, they are stepping stones. They are tools He uses to refine your character, strengthen your faith, and prepare you for the blessings He has already set aside for you. No trial is wasted when it is surrendered to God. There are moments when people may doubt you, criticize you, or even stand against you. Their words may sting, and their actions may seem to delay your progress. But let this truth settle in your soul: no weapon formed against you will prosper, because God's hand is upon you. The same God who parted the Red Sea, who raised Lazarus from the dead, and who conquered death itself is the one who has written your destiny. His plan does not falter because of human interference. He has already accounted for every challenge, every delay, and every mistake. You are not defined by your past or limited by your present. God sees the full picture. He knows the dreams He has placed in your heart, and He knows the right time and way to bring them to fruition. Trust that His timing is perfect. It may not always align with your expectations, but it is always for your good. When doors close, it's not because you are unworthy, it's because He has something far greater waiting for you. When delays occur, it's not because you are forgotten, it's because He is aligning circumstances in ways you cannot yet see. Faith is the anchor that holds you steady as you wait. It is the assurance that even when you cannot see the path ahead, the one who leads you sees it all. It is the confidence that His promises are not empty and His plans are not fragile. Stand firm in that faith. Speak life over your dreams, even when doubt whispers otherwise. Declare God's truth over your journey, even when the road feels uncertain. Your life is not a series of random events, it is a masterpiece in progress. Every brushstroke of joy and sorrow, every layer of triumph and trial is part of a grand design. God is the artist, and He is not finished yet. Trust Him to complete the work He has started in you. He is the author of your story, and no one else holds the pen. When fear tries to paralyze you, when disappointment tries to dishearten you, and when uncertainty tries to discourage you, remind yourself of this: God's plan for you cannot be stopped. Not by people, not by circumstances, and not by anything in this world. His love is your foundation, His grace is your strength, and His purpose for your life is unshakable. God's plan is unshakable. This truth is a foundation that cannot be moved, no matter the storms or challenges that arise in life. His plan is rooted in eternity, crafted with love and wisdom that surpasses human understanding. It is not something fragile or uncertain, nor is it influenced by the circumstances we see or the opinions of others. God's plan is like a mighty river, flowing with purpose and power, carving a path even through the hardest of obstacles. The world often presents us with a narrative that we must be in control of every detail of our lives, that our destiny depends solely on our efforts, or that unforeseen circumstances can derail our purpose. But this perspective is limited, for it fails to recognize the sovereignty of God. His plan for each of us was established long before we took our first breath. The scriptures remind us, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." These words are not mere encouragement, they are a declaration of certainty, a promise that transcends the temporal and anchors us in the eternal. There may be moments in life when it feels like everything is falling apart, as if the dreams we've cherished are slipping through our fingers. Doors may close, opportunities may vanish, and paths may seem blocked. It's in these moments that the strength of God's plan becomes evident. What appears to be a setback is often a setup for something greater. The delays and detours we face are not the end of the story, but chapters in the unfolding masterpiece of our lives. God's plan is not contingent on the conditions of the world or the cooperation of others. He moves beyond human limitations, working all things together for the good of those who love Him. Doubt may whisper that you are unworthy, that you have made too many mistakes, or that your time has passed. But God's plan is not dependent on your perfection. His grace covers your imperfections, and His power is made perfect in your weakness. The Bible is filled with examples of ordinary people who, despite their flaws and failures, were used mightily by God. Moses doubted his ability to lead. David stumbled into sin, and Peter denied Christ. Yet their destinies were fulfilled because God's plan for their lives was unshakable. He doesn't call the perfect, He perfects the called. This unshakable plan is not just for the grand moments of life, but also for the quiet, everyday steps of faith. It is active in the big decisions and the small choices, in the victories and the struggles. Trusting in His plan means releasing the need to control, and instead embracing the assurance that He is in control. It is living with the confidence that no matter what happens, His purpose for your life will prevail. God's plan is not just a hope for tomorrow, it is a reality unfolding today. Nothing in heaven or on earth can stop it. Obstacles are often seen as barriers, as reasons to doubt or give up, but through the lens of faith, they become stepping stones. Every challenge, every difficulty, and every moment of resistance is an opportunity for growth and transformation. They are not meant to deter us, but to strengthen us, to refine our character, and to prepare us for the next stage of our journey. God allows these moments not as punishments, but as purposeful parts of His divine plan, shaping us into who we are meant to be. When we encounter obstacles, it is natural to feel frustrated or disheartened. We might question why things aren't going according to our expectations, or why we seem to face resistance at every turn. However, it is in these very moments that God's greater purpose is at work. Our challenges teach us perseverance, deepen our faith, and remind us to rely not on our own strength, but on His. The story of Joseph in the Bible is a perfect example. Betrayed by his own brothers, sold into slavery, and wrongfully imprisoned, Joseph faced trial after trial. Yet every obstacle he encountered was a step closer to the fulfillment of God's promise. What others intended for harm, God used for good, positioning Joseph to save a nation. Obstacles also reveal our hidden strengths and abilities. Often it is only when we are pushed to our limits that we discover the depth of our resilience and the power of our faith. Challenges force us to step out of our comfort zones, to confront our fears, and to grow in ways we never thought possible. They remind us that we are not walking alone, that God is with us, guiding us through every trial. When David faced Goliath, it wasn't just a battle between a shepherd and a giant, it was a moment of preparation for the leadership and victories that lay ahead. The obstacles in David's life were stepping stones, building his courage, trust in God, and readiness to fulfill his destiny. It's also important to recognize that obstacles often redirect us to something better. What may feel like a failure or a closed door is often God's way of steering us toward a greater opportunity. We may not understand it at the time, but hindsight reveals how the challenges we faced were necessary steps on the path to our calling. Think of the Israelites wandering in the wilderness. What seemed like a delay was God's way of preparing them to enter the promised land. Without the lessons learned in the wilderness, they would not have been ready to claim their inheritance. Obstacles demand trust. They require us to believe that God's plan is greater than our understanding, and that every step, even the difficult ones, is part of His purpose. They remind us to lean into His strength, to keep moving forward even when the way seems unclear. The very challenges that seem to block our path are often the tools God uses to shape us, elevate us, and propel us toward His perfect plan. Human interference cannot alter God's divine will. This truth is both reassuring and empowering because it reminds us that no person, no decision, and no opposition can derail the plans that God has set in motion. His authority is absolute, and His purposes are immovable. While people may attempt to hinder, delay, or even work against you, their actions are never outside the bounds of God's sovereignty. What God has ordained for your life will come to pass, regardless of human attempts to disrupt it. People may try to discourage you, diminish your confidence, or convince you that you are unworthy of what God has in store. They may judge you based on your past, misunderstand your intentions, or resist your progress. Yet none of this can undo what God has already decided. His plans are not subject to public opinion or reliant on human approval. When God opens a door, no one can shut it. When He declares a promise over your life, no amount of opposition can nullify it. This truth was evident in the life of Jesus, whose mission faced relentless opposition. Despite the schemes of the Pharisees, the betrayal by Judas, and the disbelief of many, God's purpose was fulfilled. No human effort could stop the redemption of humanity through Christ. Sometimes the interference of others feels overwhelming. You may encounter betrayal, jealousy, or unfair treatment. It can feel as though people's actions are succeeding in holding you back. But remember, God is not surprised by any of it. He sees what you cannot see and knows what you do not know. He has already accounted for every challenge and every act of opposition. In fact, He can use these very things to advance His plan. What others mean for harm, God can transform into good. The story of Nehemiah rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem is a powerful example. Despite the ridicule and sabotage attempts from his enemies, the walls were completed because Nehemiah relied on God's guidance. Human interference could not stop the divine assignment. God's will is also independent of human cooperation. You don't need everyone to believe in you or support you for God's plan to succeed. He often works through unlikely circumstances and unexpected people. Consider how God used Moses, a man with a speech impediment, to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. Pharaoh resisted time and again, but God's plan prevailed. Similarly, God used Esther, a young Jewish woman, to save her people despite the schemes of Haman. Human efforts to thwart God's purpose only set the stage for His glory to be revealed. It is easy to feel discouraged when others misunderstand or oppose you. Yet these moments are opportunities to trust in God's higher ways. His plans are unstoppable, His power unmatched, and His wisdom unsearchable. What He has set in motion cannot be undone by human hands. People may try to interfere, but they are ultimately powerless against the will of the Almighty. Every attempt to block your progress only serves to magnify His ability to accomplish His purpose in your life. God's timing is perfect, a truth that often challenges our human perspective, but ultimately brings peace when we embrace it. In a world driven by deadlines, urgency, and instant gratification, waiting for God's timing can feel like a test of patience and faith. Yet His timing is not random or delayed, it is divinely orchestrated, unfolding in a way that aligns with His eternal plan and our ultimate good. Every moment, every event, and every season is precisely positioned in the timeline of our lives to fulfill His purpose. When we look at life through our limited lens, we often desire things immediately. We pray for breakthroughs, opportunities, or resolutions, expecting them to happen on our schedule. However, God operates outside of time as we know it. His view is infinite, and He sees the entirety of our lives, the beginning, the middle, and the end. What seems like a delay to us is often preparation in His divine plan. He is not only preparing the blessing, but also preparing us to receive it. Just as a seed must undergo time in the soil before it can grow into a flourishing plant, there are seasons of waiting that are necessary for our growth and readiness. In the Bible, the story of Abraham and Sarah illustrates the perfection of God's timing. They were promised a child, but that promise took years to be fulfilled. Their waiting period was not wasted, it was a time of learning, trusting, and deepening their relationship with God. When Isaac was finally born, it was evident that his arrival was not just about fulfilling a promise, but about showcasing God's faithfulness and sovereignty. Had the promise come immediately, the magnitude of God's work in their lives might have been overlooked. The waiting made the fulfillment even more powerful. God's timing is also protective. There are moments when we feel ready for something, but God, in His wisdom, knows we are not. He may withhold an opportunity, not as a denial, but as a safeguard. If we rush ahead of His plan, we may encounter challenges we are unprepared to face or misuse blessings that we are not yet equipped to handle. His timing ensures that we receive His gifts when they will be most impactful and beneficial, both for us and for those around us. Joseph's journey from the pit to the palace is a profound example. Though his dreams of leadership were real, he had to endure years of trials before stepping into his role. Each delay was part of God's perfect preparation. Trusting God's timing requires surrender. It means letting go of our desire to control and embracing the assurance that He is in control. It is an act of faith to believe that His delays are not denials and that His pace is purposeful. During the waiting seasons, we are called to remain faithful, to keep seeking Him, and to trust that He is working behind the scenes. His timing is never late, and it is always worth the wait. What He has planned for us will come to pass at exactly the right moment. Faith is the foundation of our trust in God's plan. It is the unwavering belief that even when we cannot see the path ahead, God is leading us exactly where we need to go. Faith goes beyond mere optimism or hope. It is the certainty that God is who He says He is and will do what He has promised. This kind of trust is not dependent on circumstances, but is anchored in God's unchanging nature. Faith is what enables us to walk forward, even in uncertainty, because we know that His plan is perfect. Faith often requires stepping into the unknown. It means choosing to believe in God's promises when the evidence around us seems to suggest otherwise. Abraham demonstrated this kind of faith when God called him to leave his homeland and go to a place he did not know. Abraham didn't have a map or a timeline, but he trusted in God's word and obeyed. His faith became the cornerstone of his relationship with God and the fulfillment of the covenant that would bless generations to come. Faith, then, is not about having all the answers, but about trusting the one who does. Life is filled with moments that test our faith. There are times when the way forward seems blocked, when prayers seem unanswered, and when the weight of challenges feels unbearable. In these moments, it is tempting to question God's plan or to rely on our own understanding. Yet faith calls us to surrender our doubts and trust in God's greater perspective. The story of Peter walking on water is a vivid example. When Peter focused on Jesus, he was able to do the impossible. But the moment he let fear and doubt take over, he began to sink. Faith keeps us anchored, even in the storm, reminding us that God is in control. Faith is not passive, it requires action. It is not simply believing in God's promises, but living as though they are already fulfilled. When we act in faith, we align ourselves with God's will and demonstrate our trust in His timing and provision. The woman with the issue of blood acted in faith when she reached out to touch Jesus' garment, believing she would be healed. Her faith was the catalyst for her miracle. In the same way, our faith moves us to take steps, even small ones, toward the promises God has placed before us. Faith also brings peace. When we trust in God's plan, we no longer feel the need to control every detail of our lives. We can rest in the assurance that He is working all things for our good. This peace doesn't mean the absence of trials, but the presence of God's comfort and guidance within them. Faith transforms our perspective, allowing us to see challenges not as obstacles but as opportunities to grow and deepen our reliance on God. Faith is the bridge between God's promises and their fulfillment. It is what allows us to walk forward with confidence, knowing that no matter what happens, God's plan for us is good, and His purposes will prevail. God's plans for us are filled with hope, purpose, and victory, even when life's circumstances suggest otherwise. At times, the challenges and trials we face can cloud our understanding of His intentions, leading us to question whether the difficulties we endure have any purpose. But God's plans are not only good, they are divinely crafted to bring us closer to Him and to fulfill His higher purpose for our lives. His promises remind us that He is always working for our ultimate good, even when we cannot see it. The promise of Jeremiah 29:11 echoes this truth. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. These words were spoken to the Israelites during a time of exile, a season of hardship and uncertainty. Yet even in that difficult moment, God assured them that their suffering was not the end of their story. He had a future of restoration and blessings waiting for them. This assurance is the same for us today. No matter where we find ourselves, God's plans are steadfast, filled with hope, and focused on our growth. Life may often present circumstances that feel anything but hopeful. Perhaps we face setbacks, losses, or prolonged seasons of waiting that leave us wondering if God's promises will ever be fulfilled. It is in these moments that we must cling to His word and trust in His character. God's goodness is not negated by our trials. On the contrary, He uses them to shape us, strengthen our faith, and prepare us for the greater things He has in store. The Apostle Paul understood this deeply when he wrote in Romans 8:28 that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. The victories that come from God's plans often emerge from what initially seems like defeat. The cross is the ultimate example of this. At the time, it appeared to be the end of Jesus' ministry, a moment of despair for His followers. But what looked like loss was actually the greatest victory in history. Through the cross, God's plan of redemption for humanity was fulfilled, proving that His ways are far higher and more powerful than we can comprehend. In our lives, too, what seems like failure or delay can be the groundwork for a divine breakthrough. God's plans also carry an eternal perspective, reminding us that our hope is not confined to this world. While His blessings are evident in our present lives, His ultimate goal is to draw us closer to Him and prepare us for eternity. The hope we find in His plans transcends temporary circumstances, grounding us in the assurance of His unchanging love. Every step of the journey, whether filled with joy or trials, is part of His perfect design for our lives. Even in the darkest moments, God's plans shine through with purpose and hope. His goodness, faithfulness, and promises are unshakable, giving us the strength to persevere, trust, and walk forward in confidence. The victory He has prepared for us is not just for today, it is for eternity, and it is certain. In the grand tapestry of life, God's plan is the thread that binds everything together with purpose, hope, and love. It is a plan that transcends our understanding, yet it is always for our good. Through His timing, His promises, and the unwavering assurance of His faithfulness, we are reminded that nothing, no obstacle, no delay, no challenge can hinder what He has ordained for us. Our role is to trust, to walk in faith, and to align ourselves with His will, knowing that He is always working behind the scenes. His plans are not just about achieving victories or receiving blessings, they are about transforming us, drawing us closer to Him, and fulfilling a purpose far greater than we can imagine. With God, we are never alone, never forgotten, and always on the path toward a hope-filled future. Let us hold fast to this truth, rest in His promises, and move forward with confidence, for His plans will always prevail.
I tell you with complete certainty, the thing you have been seeking is, at this very moment, seeking you. The desire that burns within your heart was planted there by the divine, and that same divinity is now orchestrating all events, all circumstances, all seeming obstacles, to deliver unto you the perfect expression of that desire. Let us begin with a fundamental truth, a truth that many of you have heard me speak of before, but which bears repeating, for it is the foundation upon which all manifestation rests. You are God, not a part of God, not a creation separate from God, but God individualized. I and my Father are one, said the greatest teacher who ever walked this earth. He did not say, I and my Father are two, working together. No, He claimed complete unity with the divine power that creates and sustains all things. And what is God? God is your own wonderful human imagination. That is the creative power in the universe. There is no other God. When you imagine a state and assume the feeling of that state is already realized, you are literally God in action, creating the conditions and events that must follow from that state. So when I tell you that everything you've been waiting for is coming, I am not speaking of some vague future possibility. I am speaking of an absolute law, as certain as gravity, as reliable as the rising of the sun. The law of assumption states that if you assume you are what you want to be, and continue in that assumption, it must harden into fact in your outer world. Consider for a moment the things you've been waiting for. Perhaps it's financial abundance, a loving relationship, perfect recognition for your talents, or a sense of purpose and fulfillment. Whatever it may be, know this, the mere fact that you can conceive of these things means they already exist in what we might call the fourth dimensional reality, the realm of imagination, which is the very substance of God. Your task then is not to make these things happen through effort and struggle. Your task is to transfer your consciousness from where you are to where you desire to be. You must mentally live in your wish fulfilled. You must, through the controlled use of your imagination, assume the feeling of already being the person who has what you desire. Let me share with you a secret that has transformed countless lives. Feeling is the secret. It is not enough to merely visualize what you want or to affirm it with your lips. You must capture and maintain the feeling of already having it. For feeling is the language that speaks to the subconscious, and the subconscious is the creative power that shapes your world. Now, some of you may be thinking, but Neville, I have tried this, and my desire has not materialized. To you I say this, revision is necessary. You must go back and revise the experiences that have convinced you of lack, of impossibility, of unworthiness. For as long as those beliefs persist in your subconscious, they will continue to project themselves into your world. Tonight I invite you to a new practice. When you return to your home, sit quietly in your room. Close your eyes and ask yourself, what is it that I truly desire? Allow the answer to come from the depths of your being. Then, with your eyes still closed, construct a scene in your imagination that would imply the fulfillment of that desire. Perhaps it is a friend congratulating you, or simply the feeling of deep satisfaction and contentment that would accompany your desire's fulfillment. Now enter that scene. Make it as real as possible in your imagination. See the colors, hear the sounds, feel the textures, and most importantly, feel the emotions that would be yours in that moment of fulfillment. Feel the gratitude, the joy, the peace, the love. Feel it so intensely that when you open your eyes, a part of you knows with unshakable certainty that what you have imagined is now in the process of becoming your physical reality. Do this night after night, and you will be preparing yourself for the manifestation that is already on its way to you. For make no mistake, my dear friends, the law is always working. Just as the law of gravity operates, whether you believe in it or not, the law of assumption is constantly shaping your experience according to the state you have assumed. Now let us speak of preparation. How does one prepare for the arrival of their heart's desire? First, by understanding the nature of time. In this three-dimensional world, events seem to unfold sequentially, creating the illusion of past, present, and future. But in the fourth dimension, in the realm of imagination, all possible states exist simultaneously. When you enter a state in your imagination, you are actually selecting one of these already existing states and bringing it into your three-dimensional experience. The time it takes for your imagined state to materialize in your physical reality is directly proportional to the naturalness of the state you've assumed. This is why feeling is so crucial. The more naturally you can feel yourself to be the person who already has what you desire, the more rapidly that desire will clothe itself in civil form. So preparation begins with cultivating patience and faith. Patience because seed time and harvest is a law of nature. You cannot plant a seed and expect it to bear fruit the same day. And faith because you must trust the process even when your senses deny the reality of your assumption. I have witnessed countless manifestations in my own life and in the lives of those who have applied this law. Let me share with you a story that illustrates this principle. A gentleman once came to me in dire financial straits. He had lost his business, was deeply in debt, and could see no way out of his predicament. I instructed him to imagine just before sleep each night that he was counting out large sums of money, feeling the crisp beat between his fingers, and experiencing the relief and joy of financial abundance. 2 weeks passed, and nothing changed in his outer circumstances. 3 weeks and still nothing. But he persisted in his imaginal act. Then, at the end of the month, he received a phone call from a former business associate whom he had not spoken to in years. This associate proposed a partnership that, within 6 months, restored my friend to a state of financial prosperity, far exceeding what he had known before. This is the law in operation. The seed was planted in imagination, it grew in the darkness of the subconscious, and it manifested in perfect time through channels that the conscious mind could never have conceived. So I say to you, everything you've been waiting for is coming. It is already on its way. But you must prepare yourself by living from the end, by occupying the state of consciousness that would be yours if your desire were already fulfilled. Now there's another aspect of preparation that I must address, and it is perhaps the most important of all. You must be willing to let go of your old concept of self. For many of you, the person you believe yourself to be is intimately tied to the circumstances you currently experience. To manifest a new reality, you must be willing to become a new self. This is the true meaning of death and rebirth. It is not the physical body that must die, but rather the old concept of self. You must die to your present self-concept to be reborn as the self that is aligned with your desire. This can be challenging, for the ego resists change. It clings to the familiar, even when the familiar is painful or limiting. But I assure you, this death is not to be feared, for what awaits you on the other side is the fulfillment of all that you have ever dreamed. Let me be very clear about this law of assumption. It is not mere positive thinking or wishful fantasizing. It is the deliberate use of your imagination to select and occupy a state of consciousness. When this is done with feeling and persistence, the outer world must rearrange itself to reflect your inner reality. Think of it this way. Your consciousness is like a radio dial. On that dial are infinite stations, each one broadcasting a different version of reality. The station you are tuned to right now is broadcasting your current life circumstances. To change those circumstances, you must tune the dial to a different station, one that is broadcasting the reality you desire to experience. The tuning is done through your imagination, guided by feeling. When you imagine a scene that implies the fulfillment of your desire, and when you feel the emotions that such fulfillment bring, you are turning the dial to a new station. Persist in this new frequency, and your outer world will shift to match it. Now some of you may wonder about the role of action in this process. Must you not also take action to realize your desires? The truth is that inspired action will flow naturally from your changed consciousness. When you genuinely assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled, you will find yourself naturally doing the things that someone in that state would do. Moreover, doors will open that were previously closed to you. Opportunities will present themselves that your logical mind could never have devised. People will be drawn to you who can assist in the manifestation of your desire. All of this happens not because you are forcing it through willpower, but because you have changed your state of consciousness, and your outer world must conform to that inner change. Let me give you another illustration from my own experience. Many years ago, I desired to travel to Barbados to visit my family. However, I had no money for passage, and the wartime restrictions made civilian travel difficult. Rather than focusing on these obstacles, I went to sleep each night imagining that I was sleeping in my childhood home in Barbados. I could feel the tropical breeze, hear the familiar sounds, and experience the joy of being with my loved ones. Within a few weeks, I received a letter from my brother containing money for passage, and shortly thereafter, I was granted a spot on a ship bound for Barbados, despite the wartime restrictions on civilian travel. The outer circumstances rearranged themselves to match my inner assumption. This is the promise I make to you tonight. Whatever you have been waiting for, be it love, wealth, health, or any other desire of your heart, it is coming to you now. But you must prepare yourself by assuming the feeling of its fulfillment, by living from the state of consciousness of having already received it. Let us delve deeper into this preparation, for it is multifaceted and requires a certain discipline of mind. The first aspect of preparation is mental. You must clean the windows of your mind, clear away the accumulated dust of limiting beliefs and negative assumptions. Begin by watching your thoughts and the words you speak. Are they aligned with your desire, or do they contradict it? Do you affirm abundance while secretly harboring thoughts of lack? Do you speak of health while dwelling on symptoms of illness? This divided mind cannot manifest effectively. As it is written, a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. To prepare your mind, practice what I call mental dieting. Just as you would carefully select the food you put into your body for optimal health, so must you carefully select the thoughts you allow to dwell in your mind. Feed your mind with thoughts of the wish fulfilled. Starve your mind of thoughts that contradict your desire. When negative thoughts arise, and they will, for the old habits of mind do not surrender easily, do not fight them or suppress them. Simply observe them without judgment, and then deliberately replace them with thoughts that support your new assumption. The second aspect of preparation is emotional. As I have emphasized, feeling is the secret. You must cultivate the emotional state that would be yours if your desire were already fulfilled. This requires emotional discipline and awareness. Many of you live in a constant state of emotional reaction to external circumstances. Something happens, and you react with anger, fear, disappointment, or resentment. This reactive pattern keeps you bound to your current reality. To break free, you must become the master of your emotional state, choosing it deliberately rather than having it dictated by circumstances. Practice feeling the emotions of your wish fulfilled, regardless of what your senses report. Feel the security of financial abundance, even when your bank account is empty. Feel the love and companionship of a harmonious relationship, even when you appear to be alone. Feel the vitality and energy of perfect health, even when your body seems to contradict this. The third aspect of preparation is spiritual. By this, I do not mean religious in the conventional sense, but rather the recognition of your true identity as a spiritual being, as God individualized in human form. The greatest barrier to manifesting your desires is the belief in separation, the belief that you are separate from your good, separate from other people, separate from God. This belief in separation is the root of all fear, all lack, all conflict. To prepare spiritually is to embrace the truth of your oneness with all that is. It is to recognize that the power that created the universe is not outside of you, but within you, expressing as you. It is your very consciousness, your awareness, your I am. When you truly understand this, you will no longer beg or plead for your good to come to you from some external source. You will know that all that you desire already exists within you as a state of consciousness, waiting to be assumed and expressed. The fourth aspect of preparation is physical. Your physical body and environment are the densest, most external expressions of your consciousness. As such, they often lag behind your mental and emotional shifts. This is why patience is necessary. However, you can support the manifestation process by bringing your physical environment into alignment with your assumption. Clear out the clutter that represents your old life. Create space for the new to enter. Dress, speak, and carry yourself as the person who already has what you desire. This is not pretense or fakery. It is the outer expression of an inner conviction. It is living from the end, embodying the state you wish to manifest. Now let us address a question that often arises: what about the desires of others? What if what you want conflicts with what someone else wants? Remember this: in the realm of true creation, there is no competition, no scarcity, no conflict of interests. When you operate from the level of the imagination, which is the level of God, you are not taking from anyone else. You are selecting from the infinite variety of already existing states. Moreover, when you assume a state of consciousness that includes harmonious relationships and mutual benefit, that is what you will experience. If you assume a state of having what you want at the expense of others, that conflict will manifest in your experience. This is why I advocate assuming states of consciousness that embody the highest good for all concerned. Imagine not only your own joy and fulfillment, but also the joy and fulfillment of everyone involved in your manifestation. Let me share with you another principle that will help you in preparing for the arrival of your desire. It is the principle of detachment, or what some might call letting go. Many of you hold on to your desires with such desperation, such anxiety about whether or when they will manifest, that you actually push them away. This anxious attachment comes from the belief that what you want is separate from you and might elude your grasp. True manifestation requires a certain detachment, not from the desire itself, but from the anxious need to control the timing and the means of its fulfillment. When you have truly assumed the state of the wish fulfilled, you can relax in the certainty that the outer reality must conform to your inner assumption in its own perfect time and way. This detachment is not indifference. It is the quiet confidence that comes from knowing the law and trusting its operation. It is the peace of mind that allows you to get on with your daily life, secure in the knowledge that your new reality is already established in consciousness and is now moving toward you in the world of form. Now I want to address something that many of you struggle with: the appearance of obstacles or delays in the manifestation of your desire. When your outer world seems to contradict your inner assumption, it is easy to become discouraged and to doubt the law. But I tell you this: what appears as an obstacle or delay is often the very means by which your desire will be fulfilled. The bridge of incidents that leads to your manifestation may include elements that your limited perspective seem to be taking you further away from your goal. This is where faith becomes essential, not blind faith in some external power, but faith in the law, faith in the creative power of your own consciousness. Trust that the seed you have planted in the garden of your mind is growing, even when you cannot yet see the sprout above the soil. And remember this: the manifestation always comes in ways that you could not have planned with your conscious mind. If you try to dictate exactly how your desire should manifest, you limit the infinite intelligence that is orchestrating the perfect unfoldment of your assumption. So release all anxiety about the how and the when. Your job is to maintain the state of consciousness of the wish fulfilled. The law will take care of the rest, bringing your desire to you through the path of least resistance, which may not be the path you would have consciously chosen. Let me give you yet another example from my own experience. There was a time when I desired to be invited to speak at a certain prestigious venue, rather than focusing on all the reasons why this seemed unlikely. I simply imagined hearing the director of the venue introducing me to the audience. I felt the satisfaction and gratitude of this experience in my imagination. A few weeks passed, and I received no invitation. Then, seemingly unrelated to my desire, I was invited to speak at a small gathering in a private home. I accepted, though it appeared to have nothing to do with my original wish. At this gathering was a guest who, unknown to me, was a close friend of the director of the prestigious venue I had imagined speaking at. This guest was so moved by my talk that they recommended me to the director, and within a month I received the invitation I had imagined. Had I been fixated on a direct invitation coming from the director, I might have declined the seemingly insignificant invitation to speak at the private home, thereby missing the bridge of insights that was leading to the fulfillment of my desire. This is why I counsel you to release all preconceptions about how your good will come to you. Trust the law, maintain your assumption, and allow the infinite intelligence to work out the details. Now, as we approach the close of our time together, I want to address one final aspect of preparation that is often overlooked but is absolutely crucial. It is the practice of gratitude. Gratitude is the feeling that completes the manifestation cycle. When you express gratitude for something, you are affirming its reality in your experience. Gratitude is the recognition that what you have asked for has already been given. Begin now to give thanks for the fulfillment of your desire, even before it appears in your three-dimensional reality. Thank your Father, which is your own magnificent human imagination, for having already granted your request. This is not pretense. It is recognition of the truth that in the fourth-dimensional reality, where your imagination dwells, your desire is already fulfilled. Your gratitude acknowledges this truth and helps to bring it into your three-dimensional experience. Make gratitude a daily practice. Each night before you sleep, review the day as if your desire had already been fulfilled. Feel the gratitude that such fulfillment would inspire. Let that feeling of gratitude be the last emotion you experience before drifting into sleep, for the subconscious is most receptive in those moments before slumber. And as you awaken each morning, let your first thought be one of gratitude for the fulfillment of your desire. In this way, you create a consciousness saturated with the feeling of the wish fulfilled, and this consciousness must externalize itself in your world. My dear friends, I have shared with you tonight the truth that everything you've been waiting for is coming to you now. I have explained the law by which this manifestation occurs, the law of assumption, and I have outlined the ways in which you can prepare yourself to receive your heart's desire. Let me summarize these principles once more, that they may be firmly established in your understanding. First, know that you are God individualized. The creative power of the universe is your own human imagination. Second, to manifest your desire, you must assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Feeling is the secret that speaks to the subconscious, which is the creative power. Third, prepare yourself mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically for the manifestation of your desire. Live from the end, embodying the state of consciousness that would be yours if your desire were already fulfilled. Fourth, release anxiety about the timing and the means of manifestation. Trust the law, knowing that the bridge of incidents is being built to bring your desire to you in divine order. Fifth, practice gratitude for the fulfillment of your desire, affirming its reality in the fourth dimension, which is the realm of imagination. As you leave this place tonight and return to your homes, I challenge you to put these principles into practice. Select one desire, the thing you want most at this moment, and begin to live as if it were already yours. Feel the emotions it would inspire. Express the gratitude it would evoke. Embody the state of consciousness it would create. Do this consistently, persistently, faithfully. And I promise you that your outer world will reshape itself to match your inner assumption. For this is the law, and the law is absolute. Everything you've been waiting for is coming to you now. Prepare yourself by becoming in consciousness the person who already has it. For what you are, in consciousness, you must manifest in experience. The world is yourself pushed out. Change yourself and you change your world. This is the great secret, the great revelation, the great law by which all things come into being. Go now in the knowledge of your divinity, in the certainty of the law, and in the joyful expectation of the manifestation of all that your heart desires. For truly all things are possible to him who believes. Remember, creation is finished. All states exist now. Your task is not to create what you want, but to appropriate what already exists. And you do this through the assumption of the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Tonight, as you lay your head upon your pillow, I urge you to make this your practice. Enter into the silence of your own being. Construct a scene that would imply the fulfillment of your desire. Enter that scene. Make it real. Feel it. Believe it. Accept it as true. Fall asleep in that state. And watch as the power that is your own wonderful human imagination goes to work, reshaping your world to match your assumption. For the law is this, as within, so without. As above, so below. What you assume, you become. What you believe, you receive. What you expect, you experience. Everything you've been waiting for is coming. It is already yours in consciousness. Now, through your faithful assumption, it will become yours in experience. My blessing goes with you. May you use this law wisely, lovingly, and joyfully for the enrichment of your own life and the lives of all those you touch.